Again, welcome everyone. So in our last session, we got introduced to the Uno platform. We got to know about the core features of the application and how we build the application, how we manage the application. To manage the applications, first create and manage, we need to first of all register in the App Manager app. You can go to that app from the base URL or base application called Uno portal, which you can access through the URL theunoplatform.com. Okay, we have been learning about the application features through a couple of applications that we are building at PeerMe. The first one is Construction Manager and the second one is Quote Price. So we are going to continue our learning today, especially on the app configuration side. So in our last session, we talked about what are the basic application configurations, the common configurations through the app config menu. Going through this configuration menu, we understood what are the attributes and what's the purpose of each of these attributes, including the styling, overrides, etc. So today we are going to focus on the core application pieces, starting with category or data type definition, and then we will proceed gradually to triggers and functions, and we will touch upon filters. We will leave the job run for future, and then gradually in our subsequent sessions we will talk about screen design. Once again, you got a glimpse of that in previous session. We will look into more of the features of the editor and how we are going to customize application screens. Various out-of-box screens are going to be available, but we want to override. We want to create reusable screen components or pieces that will be used again and again. What are the various out-of-box components available for our purpose? And then menus. Menu is primarily used right now here in this part. You are seeing the top one is one of the menu definitions. Menu can be used in other pages also, so we can define many menus and then place it. Menu is also available as a component, so we can put it in any of the screen. And then later on we will get into the access management part through person management, group and role management, and resource management. Okay, so these cannot be covered in one session. There will be multiple sessions to cover each of these areas, and we will do that one by one. Okay, whenever we are going to create an application, the purpose of application creation is to manage data, correct? So for example, construction manager is being built to manage the expenses and income and project and many other related things which are actually related to the construction business. Okay, so we can define data types, and then this platform will give us some out-of-box screen for basic CRUD operations. Okay, so we'll look into those, how we define the data types, and is it necessary for us to have a complete structure of the data right away, immediate first time itself to make it working? Can I modify the data structure later? To what extent I can modify the data structure, and how our screens will behave? And then later on we will see how we can have an overriding custom screen associated for the standard event CRUD operations. Okay, so let's get into the system. Now, what kind of data types are defined in Construction Manager? Let's first take a look at that, and then we will try to create a new data type. Okay, so to get into the data type definition, and remember, this is not technical, this is business data that you want to deal with. You don't have to basically think about how your typical relational databases are designed and how they are related to each other, what kind of optimizations are required, how will you associate two types of data, the relations, and etc. The thing that this platform enables you with is the way you observe or you deal with data in your day-to-day life as a business user. You will have to define the data in the same format, right? So it's very, very business oriented. It's not technical oriented, and that's what we will observe, right? So to get to see the current data types that are defined, you need to expand this data menu by clicking the arrow button, and you will see category. This is the place where we are going to see the list of data types that are defined in this application. Right? These are custom data types. Now, platform comes up with some inbuilt or default data types, which we can also call system-defined data types for its own functionalities, for own behavior. For example, person or user is a system-defined data type. Resource is a system-defined data type, right? So there are plenty of them. You won't see those here in this category listing. What you're going to see is everything that you have defined in the context of the given application. Okay, so you're not cluttered with a lot of other data types. Having said that, when you are going to deal with relations and many other aspects, you will see all the categories. Suppose you have to relate one data attribute to another entity, which we are going to see as examples very soon. You will have a choice to select a category, a data category, and in that you will have a choice for both custom or app specific data types as well as system defined data types. You will see all of them, right? So you are not actually going to modify the system data types from here through this screen because you have not defined them. For advanced situations, you can still modify and extend those definitions. So we will talk about that in a subsequent session, how we can modify or extend the existing system data types. But normally you will not do that. In normal circumstances, you are going to just use them in its original form. All right. So, okay. So typically, whenever you are going to this, this is like a CRUD screen. Okay. So category, for example, this category itself is a system data type. This category is a system data type which actually stores the definitions, various definitions of the data categories. Okay. And so here you have a list screen for that category definition. Now, because that's a system data type, it is also treated like any other business objects or business data type. You will have CRUD operations possible. So you can create or edit or search or list and view. Okay. You can do all these activities. So the standard screen are going to help with that. All right. So here you see this button is for creating a new category. Once I click this, it will open a form with the category input or create screen. The second button here is to do a advanced search. Okay, suppose I want to apply filters. By default, this is listing everything. It is paginated. Okay, so far we have 17 custom data types or application data type. Okay, I will keep using data type and category simultaneously or as synonym, because category is a very generic term. You can see a category defined here, a category. Okay, so there will be scenarios where category word will have different meaning. So for us, in this case, the category list means data type listing. Okay. So this data type, so far we have defined 17 data types. Now, if you're familiar with object-oriented programming, the data type is also associated with class. Okay. What is class? Class is a template of an object. What is object? It's a copy, a real copy of the data. Okay, a bucket of data. And sometimes it is also called instance of object. Okay, so class is the template where you define the structure. So here we are also going to define the structure of the data object, and then later on we will create instances of that. Now, right now we are defining a category itself. So we are going to create an instance of category definition, and that we are going to do through this screen. And then we can search. We'll come to search a little later. So we can create, and listing is already coming out of box. We can view each item by clicking these. We can also have a quick view by simply pressing on the row. Suppose I press on this row, it will bring up this quick view screen, which is not really quick view. This itself is quick view. This is a full view of the data, and that is available to you here, right? So you can see everything about this category or category data type here. All right, you can click on this button and it will open this in its own. That means a complete screen will be filled by the same screen. Now, can you do edit inline? No, you are not going to have that. Only quick view or inline view is supported in this screen. If you have to do a editing, you can either come to this and press the edit button or press the edit button here itself. Okay, either way you will be brought to a edit screen. So let's first get into the details of existing definition, and then we will see if I have to edit something, what can I do to do that. All right, so let me click on this view and let it open. So earlier I was seeing a complete list of categories or data types. Now I'm seeing a specific data type. Or let me go back. Now, how will I go back? I can press the back button on the browser, or I can simply click the category menu once again, or I can click the view all. So we have three options in this screen itself. So let me go from here, view all. View all will bring the list again. All right, so instead of looking at the category, let's look at the income. That is quite interesting to see. So I will click on this view, and this will open the definition of income data type. Okay, now let's look at the things. Here the properties, so income data type definition, and for that matter any data type definition has many properties. And here in this case, it is split into multiple tabs. So here we have tabs, right? So primary details, properties, action screens, and other info. Don't worry, I will explain each of them one by one. The first thing is about giving it a name and a unique ID. So I said data type is equivalent to class definition. Okay, so class is a template. So the template should be given a name, an identity. Now, a unique name is necessary because that is how it will be referred all across, and that is the value that I specify in the ID property. All right, so ID property should have a unique value. Now, it is not just unique and unique across this application, not across all applications. You don't have to worry about any other application running on the same platform. It will never collide. Your definition, your application has a very specific presence or isolated presence on the platform. Although they may be hosted together, theoretically, They are sitting together, but each of them have their own environment, completely isolated from the rest. So there is no interference in the data or definition. Completely isolated hosting, as if all these applications are hosted separately. Okay, so do not worry about data collision. However, within an application, you have to have unique IDs for each custom data type or application data type or application category. Okay, and it should also be a system ID. Now, what is system ID? A system ID is like a variable name, right? So in a formal programming language like Java or JavaScript, or even in databases, when we are defining the column name, for example, it should not have special characters, it should not have spaces. So there are certain rules. Why those rules are important? Because this is normally to be used as a key in a key value pair kind of combination or a column identity. So this has to be a unique value across the application, within the application actually, and it should be a system ID. Now, when you will actually do the edit, the platform has the feature to do such validations out of box, right? So you won't have to worry too much about it. And when the definition is given, for this screen, when I open the edit screen and try to modify ID, it will accept the value only if it follows these two conditions, fulfills these two conditions, that it is unique and it is also required, of course. So it is required, it is unique, and it is system ID. All right. Once we start defining a data type, a custom new data type, we will see it in action. All right. The next thing is name. Name is basically a displayable value. Now, if you say CEM_income, to make it unique, I have used a prefix convention. CEM is the application ID. So I said CEM_income. Technically, it means income data type, but I have prefixed it with CEM so that by any chance it will not collide with any other data type. I said there are many out-of-box or system-defined data types as well. So to avoid any collision, I prefer following a naming convention. The naming convention of ID is the prefix, a prefix for the application, followed by underscore, followed by the category name. Okay, and of course no spaces. Normally I put it in all lower cases. So a snake case, which means multiple words separated by underscore only, no space, only underscore. To substitute space, I use underscore. So same underscore income is the ID here. But for normal display, it will not make much sense. So we use a readable value, which is called name. Okay, so we specify a readable value for this data type, and here we have given it a value called income. The third thing that you see here on this tab, primary details tab, is a flag, a Boolean value, which says not listed in navigations. And this is interesting thing. What happens is when you are defining or when you are actually creating your application, because you are primarily going to deal with business data, you would want to have a quick access to the CRUD screens, right? And normally the CRUD screen access begins with the listing screen. So you would want to see the listing, and if you don't find your data, then you will probably create a new one. Or if you find the data, you would want to view the details, or you would want to edit the details, right? Or you would want to search for a shortened listing. All right. Now, what happens is if you say by default, this will be unchecked. Okay. And if it is unchecked, that means if it is set to false, when your application is loaded, a label or a menu will be created here on its own. So you can see category type, report, currency. These three are basically a application data type or application category where you will see that not listed in navigations is set to false. And that's why these are appearing here. Otherwise, these will not appear. Okay, so that's the first level. However, it will not always be visible. It will have some access control checks before it is getting displayed as one of the menus, right? So even if it is kept as false, it will not always get listed. So it depends on the access permissions set on the CRUD operations for this category, right? So even if you are defining the objects at the beginning, it will not be available. The CRUD operations will not be allowed to everyone. You will have to conditionally make those accessible to a user, a type of user, or a group of user, or a user having certain role, right? So, like I said earlier, the application starts with zero trust. Okay, so as an admin, as an owner, only you have access to everything. But from that point onwards, you decide who will get to access or see what. Okay, so if you have kept this value false, once you log in again as admin, you will see this category type listed here for yourself because you have the permission, but any other user will still not see it. Okay, it's a convenience. Now, if you plan to have a custom menu defined like the upper row that you see here, you may not want it to be automatically listed. You would want to place it in certain group or as a top level menu, whatever. So you take control of that, and then here you say not listed in navigations, right? So you simply hide this from the automatic listing in the navigations. It will remain hidden for everyone, including you as the administrator. Okay, so this is a very interesting feature from the platform, which helps you bring up the component, bring up the category definition as a menu option right in the top in the header section. Okay, making sense? So let me start creating things simultaneously. All right, then you will start realizing the value of these. Okay, so I have, so instead of making changes in the construction manager app, I will use another app that we are building here, which is work in progress. Construction manager is more stable now. We are in the testing stage, so we will not make much modification here. But quote price is in progress, so we will make some changes over there and see how it behaves. All right. So I will switch to quote price application, where I have already logged in as an admin user. So I have these options available. Okay. Now, let me go to data and category and see. Okay, so here we have three application data types defined: request for code, email, and category. Now, in this context, quote your price, suppose I need to define a new data type called service providers. Okay, because the requesters will come, the end users will come, put up a code, and that will be responded by service providers. So two types of users are there. One side is service seeker or receiver, and the other side is service provider. And I don't see that, right? So I don't have a way to collect data or organize data about service providers. So let's try to define it. Okay. So what I will do, I will press the plus button here, which will open the new, create new category screen for me. All right, so this is a new category, blank screen. Two properties on this tab are mandatory. Okay, I'll quickly simply glance through the other properties. And how I said it is mandatory, this red star indication here is making it mandatory. And now when I just moved out of this, it is also indicating, it felt that, okay, I've started making modifications. So system is very attentive, and it said, well, this ID field must be given up some value because it is a required field. But this red star indicates it is required. So let's see what are the other fields which are mandatory. Okay, so I'll just quickly switch through the tabs. So I have not explained you the content of those, but let's see. Only looking for the star indication. Properties, not required, not mandatory. Action screens, none of these are mandatory. Other info, again, not mandatory. That means to start with, I only need to define two things, the ID and the name of the new data type. And then my system will accept it and will begin. Okay, so let's see. I want to have it as service provider, right? So I will give it a name. The name is service provider. And then I need to also provide a unique ID value. As a convention I explained, suppose I use QUP as the prefix and I say service underscore provider, right? So it is like almost guaranteed that this is unique. Okay, if I just put up a space and come here, then you see it says value is not allowed to contain anything but these letters or these characters. Because I have put up a space, it is not acceptable, right? So this is a system ID check. All right, I removed the space and put back the underscore because that's the only special character that is permitted. And I will keep it unchecked because I want this to show up as one of the menu items. You see, there are a few things, but are these really coming out of box or it is a custom menu? We will verify that, but let's just put it here. I will not add any service provider thing in the menu and it should get displayed here. All right. Okay, so my definition is started. At this stage itself, I can save and it will do what? It will store the definition. Now, because it's a application configuration change, ideally, I will have to reload my application or re-login. But in this case, I can simply reload the screen by pressing this small icon here or press the refresh button of the browser. Either way, it will reload the configuration for me, maintaining my session as it is. So if I don't want to log out and log in, this is a quick way for me to refresh the definition that I have added right now. And it's not just for new addition, it is only also for modifications in the category definitions. All right, so let me reload. Okay, so now what you see here, you see a menu getting added with the same name, service provider. We didn't add anything here, right? Earlier it was not present. Now it is visible, and it is visible because this definition, this property not listed in navigation is set to false. That means by default it will get listed, and that's what has happened. For some time, let's start the same application as a anonymous user, right? When I just land on the application, I basically will not log in. Okay, once I land, access the application, then I will log in and then I will have something else. So just to see if this menu is always visible, I will browse the QUP application in a separate browser session and let's see what things are visible to me. Here only home menu is visible. When I have logged in, I have many other things, including the service provider and category. So this is what I was telling you about the access permission. All right, so we will relax the permission later on, who can access service provider menu or not, but that we will do in the session when we will get into the access management. All right. For the time being, let's now look at service provider menu and see what is coming up. So I clicked on this and it says, actually it took us to the listing page, right? So CRUD screens are coming out of box for this new data type, service provider. And as expected, there are no service providers at the beginning. I can create one, I can modify and do all that. Now, let's try and create a service provider. When I clicked on this, basically it is showing me is an almost blank screen. Why is this happening? It is happening because though I have defined the service provider category, but I didn't say what are the constituents of the service provider, right? So I say, well, okay, the class name is this, but I didn't say, okay, this class is made up of these attributes or these properties. I didn't define those properties. So obviously it is showing me a blank form. And if I save it, it will create an item with no property, right? So which is basically not making sense. Okay, so let me actually try that. What happens? If I simply press a save button, will it create any instance? Yes, it will. Let's try that out. It actually created an instance, and by default, a system ID is assigned as the ID or name. Now, carefully observe this. This is actually the ID, system ID for the instance of service provider object that is created, and this is visible in your URL as well. The URL gives you a lot of information, and it's patterned, so you can very easily infer the purpose and meaning of the URL. Now for this particular object, the value that is shown here is the ID itself. And so it indicates that I have already created an instance of this. And how can I verify? Let's go back to the list of service provider by clicking on the view all or pressing this service provider. Either way, I will see the list of service provider. Okay, so the main screen of service provider. Now it is not saying no service provider. It is saying an entry is created. If I keep adding things like that, it will show me more values, but basically it is empty. It looks like empty. And why empty? Because it doesn't have any attributes defined. All right. So let's get into the definition of service provider once again and try adding more properties. In fact, starting with first property and see how the CRUD screens change itself. Okay. Now, how will I modify the definition? Once again, I will go to data menu and category. And here now in the category list, I have the service provider and I can view or edit. I want to edit. So I will click on the edit button, not creating another, because I want to edit the existing definition. So it is showing me the name and ID. Now you see in edit mode, ID is not modifiable. Okay, it is not showing up as a text input box here. It is fixed, and that is good because once the ID is defined, it will be used for various references. So if you change it, then your whole application may break, right? But you can change the name. Suppose you wanted the name to be a provider only. Okay. So instead of service provider, I want to name it provider. Fine, I can modify that. And then let me add some properties. Where will I add? I will go to properties tab and then start adding the properties. Okay, so I can have one or more, actually 0 or more properties. So I can keep adding properties. It shall be listed here as I progress, and then eventually I need to save the entire definition. Now from here you have to be very careful, because you may make modifications, and finally if you do not come back and save the whole definition, your all changes will be lost. So there could be a series of screens where you will see save, but remember, unless you come back to the original first screen and press the save, your changes are not saved. Okay, so be very careful about saving your changes. You made the changes in inner screens and did not press the save on the outermost screen, your changes are not persisted. All right, so I'm going to now add a property. So once I click on this add button, it will bring up a dialog which says add properties. And now this is another form which is quite complex, but only few things are mandatory here again. And what is mandatory? Name and ID. Like category definition, this also requires you to have a unique identity for the property and a descriptive name or a label. You can add a description also, because this description will be useful as a hint in your various CRUD screens. All right. But what are the other things associated to the property? Again, we have tabs. So let's see if anything else is mandatory. So type details, I don't see any star. That means none of these are mandatory. Here, anything mandatory? No. Here, anything mandatory? No. So I have a lot of things to configure, but all of them have some either default value, or if I do not provide, it will be simply ignored. But what is necessary for me to provide is ID and name. Now, let us now go back to our business definition of service provider or provider and see what are the attributes that I want to collect about a provider. So most likely we will start with name or business name, and then perhaps email ID, and then what kind of service categories they are interested in, right? Or they provide the service in which categories and all that. So let's start building that definition. So the first one is business name, or yeah, let's be. Now here I have a flexibility to avoid using a prefix, though it's a good convention that we prefix each property, but the property definition is within the context of the category definition, right? So among the properties, it should have unique value, but it will not collide with the property definition of any other class or category. So we can use or put up the prefix or not put up the prefix. So let me see, put it as name, simply business name or name. All right, and simply save it. I will just ignore everything else and depend on the default value. Save. Similarly, I say, well, I am giving you the contact, or rather simply email ID. Here I say email ID. And then I think, well, email should be always checked for its validity, because email is not a regular string. It should be having some checks, right? So can I put up a check? All right. So put up a check means, okay, so type details. What is there in the data type? Is there any special data type for email? Let's look at it. So I have various data types for different properties, and it is arranged here alphabetically. So array, boolean, color, date, date time, default. Now default is actually equivalent to text or string. I don't know if there is a string data type here. It is there, right? So string or text is same, and default data type is string. Okay, so I have a property called email. Now, if I select the data type email, it will basically put up a check for the email format. However, I have another validator check also for email. I can put up this as well. You also notice that if I want to make this property mandatory, I can put up a validator check as required enabled. Okay, I'll talk about entity type later in a very short while. Okay, so I said, well, this property is not mandatory. That's why I'm not putting a check along with required, but I have specified a non-default data type called email. Okay, and I will leave the rest as it is, and then I save this. But now I think, well, actor's name should be provided. Whenever a provider is getting created, the provider should at least provide the name. So I want to make that name mandatory. Can I do that? Yes. Even if I have already defined the property, I can go back and edit. Now I need to scroll to the very right because the property has so many fields, and then press on this choices button and click on edit. When I click on edit, it brings up the same dialog pre-filled with the values for that property. So I will go back to type details tab and I say validators required is checked. I can keep the data type as it is, which is default is string, and I'm happy with that. So name is a string, validated is required, and it is not a system ID, of course, because spaces are allowed in the name. I don't want to put a min check, min length check, or max length check, or any other check, but required is the only check that I want to put. All right, so I will save. Two values, and I think this is enough. So let's say save. And if I save, now I'm saving the whole definition. I've already saved. And then if I go back to service provider, ideally I should refresh my screen. So let's reload. It's a good habit to reload the screen after every category definition change. There are other similar things where your local cache needs to be refreshed. The server has been refreshed, but the client has not yet refreshed, so you shall do that. Now, if I go back to provider, let us see the difference. Do you see any difference? First of all, the level itself of this category has changed. From service provider, it has become provider because we have changed the name attribute. But what we have not changed is the ID. So you can observe the ID is still QUP service provider. ID is never changing. Okay. Name changed. So the menu changed, the listing screen label has changed automatically. And now in this listing, because we had created one entity, one object, I see this, and now it is showing as a table, and here I have table columns as the field names or property names, like business name is a property, email ID is a property. Obviously the values are not present, so this is empty, these cells are empty, but I have a view and edit. Now if I look at view, what happens? I can simply press this row here and it will show me the values right away in the side pane. So here you see email name is empty, email ID is undefined. Okay, and this is the ID showing as the entity level. All right, let me modify. So I will now press this edit button. I could have pressed here as well, but this is another convenient way. So I can Press this edit and it will open the form, and now I can provide the value. Suppose I still want to save as it is. So I press the save, and it is not allowing me to save because the business name is a required field. Okay, so business name is required and it is not allowing me to proceed without that. Okay, so let me put a peer me software technology. All right, and then I in email field I type just a random thing, and you see this is not in proper email format. You are getting a message right away here. So it is suggesting you to make it a proper value. So suppose I give my email ID here. Okay, and then I do a save. It will now be accepted, and it is now showing me name itself as the label of this. So earlier it was showing the ID as this. So default behavior for CRUD screens is that it will look for a name property, a property which has an ID called name and small letter, and then that will be considered as the label. And if that is not present, then the system generated ID for that entity will be used as the label that you see here on the CRUD screen, right? So this is how it is. Let's now go back to the listing and see what happens. So I will click on the view all, and now the same entry has business name and email ID. Got it? So what we have done so far, let's quickly take a look at what we have done. So we defined a new data type. We started with only name of the data type, name and of course ID, and we got that listed as one of the menu items. And what it did was it allowed us to perform the CRUD operations. We started with creating entities, and it allowed me to save an empty one without any properties, but that is fine. It was allowed. We created one instance. We saw that listed here, and then we modified the definition. We went back to the definition. We added a couple of properties. We came back to the listing, and then this CRUD screen of listing automatically showed those two new properties as two new columns for this tabular view. Okay, this grid view. And then I saw the view of that element, that particular entity in its own view, detailed view, and we saw empty values for business name and email ID. We modified that, and that modified value is now stored, and that is what was also reflecting on the view screen and also on the edit screen, right? So you see your CRUD screens which are coming out of box, it's so adaptive to your changes, and it works as you want it to work. Okay, and as you modify your definition, as you progress with your changes, your out of box screens are so adaptive. So you can make changes any number of time based on your business requirements, and your CRUD screens will adapt to those changes. All right. I will make one more change in the category definition for a provider. And what is that? We said, well, this provider will serve in more than one service category. Now, what is service category here? So service category is one of the data types that is defined in this system. And how do I know it? Let's see the category listing once again. And here I have a category called category. Now, if you recall, there is a category custom definition here in this application as well. CEM application, I had a category. Let's, for the time being, look at the definition. So here the category is, name is category, ID is CEM category, and then you have few properties here. name, description, type, and customer account. All right. Now come back to this quote your price application and see the definition of this category. Here the ID is QUP category. There it was CEM category. So a good convention that we are following. The label could be anything, but ID makes the difference. And we have said not listed in navigations is false. That's why it is showing up here. In this case, what was the scenario? Not listed in navigation was set to true. That's why it is not automatically getting listed here. You don't see it among these. So these three types are perhaps having the not listed in navigation as false. Let's quickly verify. Report. So if I see report here, not listed in navigation is false. That's why it is showing up here for me as admin. Let's go back to category. All right. So this is true. So it's not listed. Now properties. Obviously, these have few properties. Coming to this application, what are the properties? It has only two property, ID and name. Here, what was there? Name and description and type. There is no ID field, right? So your business objects may have the same name in different applications, but their purposes could be very different. Purposes are actually explained through the whole definition, not just the name. Okay. So a category in construction manager versus a category in quoter price versus a category in on a platform application. Three things very different from each other. The name indicates the same, or perhaps gives the impression of the same thing. Actually, it is different. All right. So now we'll focus on this category. What is this? This is basically a list of service categories that are supported or allowed in this application. Okay, so ID and name. Let's see what type of categories are right now supported. So I'll go to the listing view of this category. I can go from here if it is visible, or I can come from here. So when I have a category list definition, category list is shown. I have a additional quick action, view main or view main, which will take me to the listing screen for this category. And so far there are two category lists, two types of supported service category. One is application development and second is miscellaneous. Okay. Now PeerMe wants to provide services in the application development category because we are a software company, right? So we want to provide services only in application development category. Tomorrow, the system allows various other service categories like mango seller or shoemaker or electrical services, okay, household cleaning services. So we can support many service categories, but not all vendors or not all providers will provide service in all categories. So I should be able to tell the system what categories I can support. Okay. That means when I have a definition of myself as a provider, I should tell you what categories I'm interested in or I can provide service about. All right, so let's add a property called my categories or something like that in the provider definition. Okay, so I came back to the providers category definition, and among the properties, I'm now going to add a property called service categories, for example. I can give it a unique name and ID, service underscore categories, and that is it. Okay, and I can do a save. I can come back to provider, and It has automatically refreshed, but as a good practice, I could have reloaded the screen. But I see a third field getting added here. Let's look into the edit view and see what happens. Now for service category, it is giving me a text box. Okay. Now the problem here is with text box, I may type app dev, but then it may not. Suppose somebody is looking for all service providers who is providing services in this category, I may or may not get listed. Why? Because that will do a filtering on the category, service category, application development. There were two categories, if you remember, miscellaneous and application development. Now, if I type in anything and my application allows me to type in just anything, then it may be not very controlled. What actually I want is on this screen, it should give me choices to select from the predefined service categories. So today there are 2, tomorrow there will be 10. I should be able to choose from that standard listing. And then if I have done that, then I will be able to get listed in the appropriate searches done on those fields. Otherwise, it may not work. Okay, so category or service category is a predefined data type. In this case, not predefined, but it's an application data type that is defined. And I now want provider data type to be linked to category data type. Okay, getting a little complicated, but this is how the business definitions are right now working. The business objects are related this way. Okay, so this is not really helping. Can I have a way to search and select the category? Okay, so let's go back to the definition and figure out if I can modify the definition, which will allow me to search and select instead of typing everything and then hope for the match. So I come back to properties. I actually I didn't want to come to category, but I wanted to come to provider, because here I am making changes, added a property called service category. And let me go to the edit screen for this. That pop-up dialog will come, and I will now try to figure out if the non-default values have something. Okay, so for any object to object relationship, suppose a property is actually referring to another entity type or data type or a category in the application, what you have to indicate here is in the data type, you will say entity. You have two choices, basically entity or entity inline. So in this case, I will do entity. What is the difference between entity and entity inline data type? If I select entity, then the system will give me a choice to search and select one of the existing instance of the given entity or given category. But if I say entity inline, then it means I need to fill that information right away. So it will basically be a nested object. Okay, so it's not going to create a separate existing object for that data type, but it will create an object inline. Okay, the name indicates the purpose. So entity inline means it will open a create form and I will fill in the data and it will get saved. While if I have entity, I will search and select. So it's a relationship. Otherwise, it's like a nested inner object. Okay, so I said entity, but that's only data type. I also need to indicate what type of entity, what category. Okay, so now I will press this entity type, and then here I see various categories listed, And then these categories are grouped by app categories definition and core categories or system defined categories. Now we know at this stage, I want to add a reference to the app categories category. Right? Too many category thing is coming, but that's how it is. So there is a category under app categories and there is a category under core categories as well. But you see, to differentiate, it has two things listed, label and the ID, name and ID, both are displayed so that you do not get confused. And that's where the convention helps. Every category should have a unique name. And if you observe, all of these and most of these here are starting with uno underscore. So that's the convention that is followed in out-of-box core categories, and in your custom categories or app categories, you are using what we have been using in here is QUP underscore as the prefix. Okay, so let me select this category. And so I have now indicated that this property service categories is linked to entity type category as an entity data type. That means it should, the expectation is when I come back to the edit or create screen, it should allow me to search and select. All right, let's save it. And don't forget to save the whole definition, otherwise my changes are not present. So I save it and I will reload, but let's see. I'll go back to provider CRUD screen and do the edit here of the same existing object and see what. Now you see the difference. Earlier, this was showing me a text box, a simple input box. Now it is giving me a button which says set. So let me press this button and then it brings up this again input box, but this is not a regular input box. As I start typing, it will give me some choices. So it's a type ahead input box, and as I type, it will find the matches, and my expectation is I will select one of the one match. Okay, so I said application development, and then it is set. Fine. So I did this, I do the save, and I can go back. So here it is, and I can go back to view all, and now it is saved. Cool. So this is how I have now linked one object's property to another object, right? Entity relationship has been established. Getting it? And I can actually traverse to this definition because this is an object. So object has its own definition, so I can navigate. So easy navigations are present here. Application development and QP category, so and so, and whatever. All right, so let me go back by pressing this go back button here. But there is still one problem. I wanted to get registered in more than one category. Today I am supporting only one, application development. But suppose tomorrow I am capable of providing service in another category, I should be able to indicate, right? So system should not limit me to just one category, one service category. It should allow me to select multiple service categories. Now, how will I do that? So system should allow me to do that. Right now, it is allowing me to only specify only one service category. How can I expect the system, or how can I say the system that you shouldn't allow just one, you should allow more than one? Okay, again, going back to the definition, we will make some changes, and obviously it should support this as well. What you should be observing here is that you are gradually making changes in your application data type definition. So your application is now gradually progressing. You started with one service category, and tomorrow you decided, well, a vendor should be allowed, a provider should be allowed to get registered in multiple service categories. So your system should be adaptive enough to allow that. Okay, so I will go back to the definition to indicate how it works and how will that change we made, immediate change or in future. Same way, go back to category definitions for the provider, go to properties and service category. I wanted to indicate that it is not just one, it is more than one. So I'll edit, and where will I indicate that? I'll go back to type details tab, and here it says multiplicity. So if it is empty, or if I put 1, it will be 1-to-1. Okay, so only one instance of this property, only one value for this property will be allowed. But if I say, well, you are allowed to subscribe up to, say, 3 categories, 3 values for this. Okay, 3 categories. So I can simply say 3. And then it will allow me to add 3, and then beyond that it will say no. All right, so let's try this. Or let it be 2. All right, so I do this, and I'm not forgetting to save again the whole definition. I'll come back to provider and see what is happening now. Not this, my earlier value is gone. This is a problem if you are changing the data structure. So sometime your existing records may break, and this is a major change from a singular value to array value or multiple values. So it is obviously going to affect. But for your rescue, you have something interesting here. So your values are now getting listed in this way. And here, what you are actually having is you can simply delete this. Let's delete or clear. And here now, instead of set, I have a add button. So add means I can add more than one. You have already seen this add button on the properties tab of category definition, which allowed me to add more than one property, right? So very familiar. So click add, and here it is not opening a full form. Instead, it is bringing up a simple input box. And what is this? I can again type the name, and it will give me the choices matching with it. I select one of those and it gets listed here. Similarly, I want to add one more, and I say I support miscellaneous services as well. And though the system has only 2, now you see the add button itself is gone because it has recognized the limit. You had set a limit of 2, so it will not allow you to add more. Now, if you want to add a different one, you will have to remove at least one. Okay, so how will you remove from this listing? Press this button again, and then you have a delete. So any of the line item can be deleted, and once you delete, your add button is back. And suppose this kind of view is actually not good for you. You have choices to switch the listing view from a regular table to grid to carousel and tree and chips as well. Let's see chips, what happens with chips. So it will show you as small boxes, rectangular boxes, linearly placed. Suppose I switch to grid, what happens? It is showing me same thing in larger grid with values displayed differently, not in tabular form. If I switch to carousel, what happens? So it gives me a way to navigate like this. Now, how will I see it? Let me add the miscellaneous for the time being and switch to carousel view, and then it allows me to navigate like this. Okay, so various views of listing is possible. Of course, it is not preserved. You will lose this by default. It will come back to the regular table view. Okay, but let me save this. Now, as soon as I saved, and I can again go back to listing view to see what happens. Here it is showing me that list once again. Okay. So this is good. I am seeing everything. I now enabled a property which allows multiple values, an array, not just single value, and also associated that with a existing data type. So I do a select and add as a reference, not adding an inline, because service category is something that will be referred from many places. Here I'm adding to provider. It will be referred from a request for quote. So it is good to have that separate, defined initially, and then referenced from other places. If you want to relate it with more technical term, it is like primary key, foreign key reference, right? So one table of a SQL database referring to another table through a couple of fields from each other. Okay, and you saw the limits are respected. Now, if you didn't want to put a limit, I said 2 as the multiplicity. By default, empty or 1 will keep it a single value thing. As soon as I do put up anything else, any positive integer more than 1 will make it multiple. And if I put a number, that will be the limit. But if I don't want a limit, I want it unlimited. The description said, let's go back and observe. I go back to the definition of provider, properties, category, service category, edit, type details. Here it says, put any negative integer to make it unlimited. Okay. So any positive integer will be respected as it is for the limit check. And if you don't want a limit and you still want it to be multi-value, put a -1 or any negative value. So -1, -100, it doesn't matter. Any negative value, anything less than 0 will be considered as multiplicity unlimited. Okay. So let's keep it to 2. In fact, I will simply cancel this. Also, when I was looking at the listing view, I felt that if I go back to listing, I felt that this is too much to be displayed. What I actually want to see in the provider list is only the business name. If I'm interested in some business name, I will click on the arrow or click on the view to get into the details, right? So I don't want the whole detail to be displayed all the time, especially in the listing view. So this is basically indicating this is quick view and this is full view or detailed view. Now I have a choice to indicate which property should be considered in quick view and not. Full view, of course, means all properties, but in quick view, I can selectively say, do not show this property in a quick view. Now, this listing view is always showing the entities in quick view mode. When you press the full view mode, then only you will see everything. So I basically want to show only this business name in the quick view. I don't want to show email ID and service categories in the quick view. How can I do that? I can do that again by modifying the category definition. So I come back to provider category definition, go back to properties, service categories, edit, and now I'm going into the third tab. In third tab, I have a lot of visibility related indications. So I say, well, some property I don't want to display on the new screen. When I'm creating this screen, for example, this provider itself, when I want the provider to register themselves, I want to start with only name and email ID. I don't want them to specify any category. Just imagine. So I will put this not on new, and remember what property we are changing right now, service category. So all the configurations that I will make here is applicable to only the corresponding property. But for the time being, I said, well, I don't want the service categories to be listed on quick view screen. So I'll say not on quick view. While there are many other properties, many other visibility levels, we'll talk about those in detail as we progress. But if I don't want to show this property on quick view screen, I will just tick this and do save. I also didn't want email to show up on the quick view, so I will modify that definition as well. Email ID, visibility, not on quick view ticked, save, and finally both definitions saved. Ideally, I will do a refresh, reload screen, which will reload my cache, but many a times this is automatically refreshing the cache. So we are safe in many cases. So provider, go back to that provider listing and see. Now it is only showing me the business name because the other two properties are configured to not get displayed in quick view, and this tabular view is quick view. So those are hidden. If I press on this row, it brings up the detailed view or full view, and I see other properties as well. I could have pressed this to have its own screen for display, right? So this is how I can control the visibility of properties on various screens. What do I want to show and not show on create new screen or edit screen or quick view screen. Full view screen is of course going to show everything. However, if you do not want to show something on even full view screen, there are properties like hidden. Okay, so hidden will make it invisible all across. Now, what is the situation where you will have a property which is always hidden? Of course, there will be situations, business situations, where you will have some properties associated with the business object, but you don't want to really display the value of that on screen ever. Like some system managed properties. So for example, who is the owner of this data, who created this object, or at what time, last time it was modified, say last updated time and date. You don't want to show at any stage. You may want to just use it for some technical purpose. You can keep it hidden, and there will be many such scenarios possibly. Okay, so you can keep it hidden, you can keep it disabled for editing, so you still show it, but do not enable the edit even on newer edit screen. You have already observed something similar for ID property of category. When we were editing, it was disabled. When we were creating, that property was enabled. Now, the visibility allows you to just hide or save. Disable or enable is slightly complicated. Disable will keep it disabled throughout. That means both edit or new screen. But the kind of behavior we wanted here for category definition on the new screen, that field should be enabled and visible, of course. And on edit, it should be visible but disabled. This combination cannot be achieved right now through basic configurations. And that is where something else will come in, where we will have more complex scenarios to handle that we will do through triggers. Okay, so triggers are basically additional logic that we want to execute in certain scenarios. The scenarios could be entity related. That means the screen through which I'm making modifications in the objects. Entities are nothing but instances or a type of data category, or it could be time driven. Okay, at certain time period, I want to do certain activity, some logic to be executed. So basically, it's a logic that I want to execute, business logic, anything that I want to do based on certain event. So we will do that complex situation management, like a property is editable on one screen and not editable on another screen between edit and new, or visible on one screen, not visible on another screen, that we can configure through the properties visible and disabled, right? So anything which is not configurable easily from here, we have a way we can do this through a little bit of configuration and programming. And that's where this system will become low code. So far, whatever we have done in today's scope, we have not written a single line of code, right? So we can build applications using this platform without writing single line of code. I just defined the data type and it gives me all screens for create, read, update, and search and list. And I also created associations with other data types, and everything so far has been done only through certain screen settings. No line of code written, custom line of code written so far. Okay, so we still have many more things present in the data category definition, but we will talk about those in subsequent sessions as the need arises. But for the time being, I will do a quick review, 1 minute. So what we did, we came to category, added a new category through create new, and then kept modifying the definition. While modifying the definition, I could change the name, but I couldn't change the ID, that is read only. I could conditionally uh, set this to true or false to get listed here, various properties, and one by one we made various changes. We can specify a specific data type, association with an entity, another data object, set the multiplicity to make it a single value to multiple values. And remember, this is not just for entities. You could have it for any other data type as well. Suppose you want to store or collect multiple email IDs, you could have indicated multiplicity to anything here other than one, and then this email ID field will become multi-value. Okay, validators we observed. Now we have not yet used default value field, extra parameters, group ID, serial number, these four things that is present on the last tab. We will look at them in our subsequent sessions. These are for some purposes, of course, especially the extra parameters has a lot of value, and then various values. Okay, so the editor, the viewer, these are again some custom components that we can specify to be used as editor or viewer for this property. Now, by default, for every data type or data type multi-line combination, you are seeing certain things. Like if you have said data type default, then it shows you input box. If you would have said data type Boolean, it will show you a checkbox. When you said data type entity, it showed you a button which said set. When you said data type entity with multiplicity more than one, it gave you add button and then search, right? So these are default components for edit. And similarly for view also, there are default components, but you can override them. You can use some other custom components for this. Okay, that's where the extensibility comes. And then you have various visibility controls, not on create screen, not to show on edit, not to show on quick view, not to show on search screen. Now search screen we have not yet touched. When we will look into that, we will see how that works. Considered part of the quick search. We have used quick search, but we have not done that for this custom data type. We did it, we used it for category or service category. And then support translations, that's a special thing that will be very advanced scenario, hidden and read only, and then depends on. Hidden and read only also are related to visibility, depends on is another special thing that we will learn about later. So right, so many features are present for the category definition itself, and then beyond the basic configurations, there are scenarios where we will use the bit of code or little extra code to even extend this further. All right. Then comes the action screens. We just have not used any of these so far, but once we start defining custom screens, we can set those for the main screen, which is the listing screen, search screen, which is coming up again and again when we'll actually use the search. Very rarely changed, create and edit and full view and quick view. These bottom four will be set quite often, but main screen will be changed very occasionally. We have scenarios where we change the main screen, especially in construction manager app. Very rarely we have changed search screen because search screen will be used mostly through the standard search option that is very powerful. We will look into that in our next session. Other info at the category level, similar to property level groups and serial number. Here we can also indicate which an array of property groups. So that is how this will be useful in creating a tabbed view instead of a linear screen for various edit screen or view screen. Okay, so this we will observe and learn about in our subsequent session. Okay, so a lot about category, and this is the most powerful feature of and fundamental feature as well of the platform when you are trying to build an application. All right, any question?